Okay, welcome back everybody. Not sure how we scheduled edibles after lunch versus before lunch, but we have. And Peter Go, who you heard from earlier today, is promising us all free samples, at least of content. This panel is basically about math. And the simple math is 93% of patients, consumers, are wanting and demanding edibles. That's it. I think we live in a democratic nation. I would say 93%, a vast majority, given we have a majority government in power with 38% of the vote, but I won't get into politics. But, and that's what this is all about, is talking about edibles. When are they coming? What can we do collectively to make sure we're meeting the needs and demands and wishes of the vast majority of cannabis users? Peter, go, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you again. Hopefully everybody had a good lunch. Chicken or veggie? Show of hands. Chicken? Chicken? Veggie? Didn't eat because you're just fine? Awesome. We're in for a real treat today. I'm going to keep this really short because you're going to want to hear from these people. So to my left, you have Chuck. Then you have Virginia, Terry, Dooma, Andrew. You can read their bios online. Their website's full of great content. So I'm not going to do the usual, take 5 minutes to tell you what you can read on your own. What are we going to cover today? 4 key areas of conversation. I think you're going to find great input, some lively conversation, and dare I say, even a little lively debate. So we're going to ask, well, what's the market opportunity? So Tony sort of stole my thunder a little bit. He says the great majority. So, I mean, how many of you really believe that, post-October 17th, that we're going to 2019, that we're moving from combustion to everybody else? Everything else. Put your hands up if you believe that's happening. Moving from combustion, smoking it, to everything else about consuming cannabis. All right, it must be my accent or something like that. You hear it the first time. It's horrible, horrible. Immigrant when I was 5 years old, and I still have that accent. So we're going to talk about what's the market opportunity, what are the categories, right? We're going to touch on regulatory. I mean, up here we have manufacturers, we have regulatory experts, we have everybody's an entrepreneur. I like to say that I'm entrepreneurial too, being with MNP. And then we're going to ask some questions, well, what can we learn from the US and around the world? And finally, we're going to ask about new entrants and players, and what's that look like, and what threats as well as opportunities does that play. And so we have a great distinguished panel that will be able to cover those topics in good breadth and depth as well. So with that, I'm going to kick off with a question for everybody to talk about their company really quickly, and then we'll dive into the product categories conversation. So Andrew, why don't we start with you, and we'll just work this way.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Andrew Parshad. I'm the president and founder of Cannabis License Experts. So we are a firm that offers basically end to beyond license solutions. So from one end, covering licenses from cultivation, processing, selling, research, testing, and provincial licenses as well for retail recreational purposes, through to beyond the license, and that will be HACCP food plans, through to ultimately the edibles space as well. That will have some interesting regulatory solutions that we'll be able to offer. So that's what we're about.
My name is Dooma Wendschuh. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Province Brands of Canada. And I have to say it is just amazing to be here. 2 years and 2 months ago, we started this company, and we went around to meetings around Canada and said, hey, can you help us? We want to brew a beer from the cannabis plant. And we got locked out of so many rooms. People would say to us, don't you know that Canada was the first country in the world to legalize medical marijuana back in 2001? And at that time, there had been 15 years for them to legalize edibles and beverages. And folks would say, don't you think if they wanted to allow edibles and beverages in Canada, they would have done it by now? We got laughed out of a lot of rooms, but we didn't give up. And now we are standing here basically a week away from finding the draft rules for edibles and beverages, which we expect to be released probably on Saturday. And it is amazing, and I'm very proud of my company. We are a brewery, and we have developed patent-pending technology that allows us to actually extract not just the phytocannabinoids and the flavonoids from the cannabis plant, but also to extract sugars, which we can use as a starting material for brewing a beer. So we basically brew a beer from cannabis in place of barley. We can make it from hemp, and we leave the alcohol in. We can make it from marijuana, and we remove the alcohol, and it intoxicates using marijuana or its phytocannabinoids. So that's what we do, and again, it's great to be here, and thank you guys.
So I'm Terry Donnelly, and I run a company called Hill Street Beverage Company. So we've been in the production of non-alcoholic beverages for about 10 years. We have about 18 varietals of wine, and we have quite a number of different non-alcoholic recipes for beer centered around our award-winning non-alcoholic lager, which has won 3 world championships and a number of other medals around the world for non-alcoholic products. The non-alcoholic wine and beer is the precursor. You can't have alcohol and cannabis in the same product, so we believe we have a great deal of expertise in making non-alcoholic wine and beer, which will extend into the cannabis marketplace as soon as it's legal. So we're moving from an existing beverage business. We're in about 3,500 stores right now, probably be in around 7,000 stores by the spring in time for summer, and then adding the cannabis infused products following that that will mirror and match our existing lineup of products that are available right now.
Thank you. My name is Virginia Vidal. I'm the CEO and founder of Mary's Wellness. It's a tea company. I started this company along with my son. He's my business partner, so it's a family-owned business. We are very oriented in the wellness aspect. We started with tea because as a mother of 6, I have triplets as well, and I had multiple surgeries after following the birth of my triplets, and found the need to medicate in a way that I could still function and look after my family. And that tea became something that was something I was already passionate about and was able to use to medicate while looking after my family. So we have developed a well-known brand that is distributed pretty much all over Canada. No longer is the case because now we have happily found a funding partner, that is Red Fund, that has basically introduced us and made us, we have worked a great alliance with Winter Life, which will help Mary's Wellness introduce our product over to the US and have an amazing distribution through Winter Life into the US, introducing the wellness products that we have, the teas and so on, to the American product through Winter Life. They are now our strategic, I'm a little bit nervous here, strategic alliances, and we're looking forward to the future of Mary's, and also looking forward to Christmas and the great gift that our government is about to give us with the new reg. So hopefully we'll have that soon enough to know what we'll be doing with Canada. And we're also looking forward to that, as well as introducing Mary's into the world, because I believe that cannabis and tea, that 2 blends of herbs, has great benefits to the general public, and that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to meet the people that could bridge that gap between mainstream and cannabis. We saw a need through taking care of my grandmother. That's where I saw a real need for cannabis in a nursing home. Through doing that, my grandmother is now in a nursing home, and the staff that works there has said many times over that they'd rather see their patients using a product like ours versus many of the medications that they're introduced to that is not, that has many side effects and not as beneficial to them as, let's say, a nighttime valerian root tea with cannabis that could be a very good sleeping aid versus the sleeping aids that they're currently using. So moving forward in the growth of Mary's, our goal is really to introduce a health and well-being product to the mainstream and to cannabis users, and so to give it that comfort level that new and what they call it, what do they call it, back or return users can feel comfortable knowing that they're having not just consuming the cannabis, but there's also a health benefit to what they're using. So that's our goal, and we hope to introduce this product worldwide and tell our story and our passion, and that's basically what we want to do, and we're looking forward to the Christmas gift on the Health Canada, or the Reds.
Virginia, that was awesome. You shouldn't be nervous. You did a great job. And I can't wait to try your tea when it comes to the United States.
I appreciate that.
I'm Chuck Smith. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Dixie Brands. Dixie is the owner of probably one of the largest and certainly most diverse portfolio of consumer products in the industry. We've been around for 9 years. I used to be a lot taller with a lot more hair on my head when I started the company. So that's just the nature of this crazy industry that we're in, but we're excited about being here. We have over 100 products that are in the regulated THC side. We also have 2 other companies that focus on hemp-derived CBD wellness. One is Acesso Wellness, which is a human dietary supplement company, and the other is Therabis, which is our pet CBD supplement company. So really, really happy to be here, and Peter, thanks for having us.
Delighted. And Virginia, you shouldn't be nervous at all. And, you know, given her name's Virginia and she referenced Christmas, yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. Had to do it. All right, let's get into the categories.
Thank you for all the love.
Let's get into the product categories. And, you know, we have obviously 4 people here running companies that are in beverages and drinks. So I want to start with Terry. Why did you take this on? What made you decide to go the Infused route? What do you see as the market potential? Obviously a Canadian company, and do you see going beyond elsewhere? So a lot in one question, but please start us off, Terry.
Well, we actually approached the marketplace from a societal behavior standpoint. So we began the business making a line of products for mothers against drunk driving, and then expanded that beyond behavioral issues into medicinal and health-related issues. So we now have partnerships with probably 8 or 9 major health research organizations that are researching cures and treatments and therapies for disease states that are largely caused or complicated by alcohol, and where cannabis is actually a therapy or treatment. So we looked at the larger marketplace of alcohol consumption and the awareness that alcohol is a toxin. It's indicated in about 200 different diseases. It's contraindicated in about 450 medications. And so you've got this large part of the population that's poisoning themselves by taking medication with alcohol, and could be given an alternative that's far safer, far healthier for them to be able to consume, and lets them participate in all the social wonderfulness that comes from, you know, being slightly intoxicated, having that social lubricant that we use alcohol for, that enhancement of a meal, enhancement of the ability to de-stress and reduce anxiety, all those things that we use alcohol for, but without any of the toxicity. So when we saw that cannabis was really an opportunity to take advantage of, and the large unmet need of about 40% of the population that's on a prescription drug regimen that's contraindicated to alcohol, we saw this huge swath of the population that could be consumers of a beverage that doesn't have any negative impact on them. Then when you look beyond into what the normal healthy consumer is looking for, the ability to drink products that have fewer calories, that have none of the toxicity, no future risk from a health standpoint, and it just became such an appealing category and segment for us. And we already had a full lineup of products that were great tasting, non-alcoholic, adult alternatives to alcohol. Thought, well, if we could put cannabis in those beverages without impacting the taste, we could have a winning formula. So that's the path we went on.
Thank you, Terry. Chuck, can I ask you, you know, south of the border, as you looked at building Dixie and where it's come from, what were the drivers for you? I mean, in the U.S., as we know, it's state by state. Right?
That's right, Peter. You know, Dixie started 9 years ago, and our very first product was in a line of infused drinks. It was actually infused tea. That's how we actually started the company. So we've really been doing drinks for a long time. I think that, you know, I tongue-in-cheek asked what would happen if it wasn't Constellation that invested in Canopy, it was Frito-Lay. would we all be talking about salty snacks as opposed to drinks as the next great thing? The reality is that this is a big consumer industry now. And in the United States, even though it's very fragmented, we have so many recreational markets that are opening that the consumer profile is broadening so significantly that we can actually now start segmenting. Whereas in a particular state, the market might not have been big enough to really drive segmentation. You know, pretty soon a customer is going to be able to get on a plane in Boston and fly to Denver and over to San Francisco and then up to Toronto, actually, and be able to buy a product. And it may be a drink because they're comfortable with that format, or it may be some other type of approachable product. And you know, from our standpoint, we want to build a brand that people trust and have confidence in. We want them to walk into a store and pick a Dixie product.
So I gotta go over to Virginia here because she's going to be a new entrant in some of your markets. It's wonderful, right? In our industry, we collaborate even though we're competitors as well, or soon to be competitors. Virginia, what made you, as you built out in Canada, decide to go into the States and with the partner you chose? What were some of the drivers around that in this category?
Currently, because of the current Canadian regulations and what we're really allowed to do, and we want to keep the brand alive. And I think on a regular basis, we get phone calls for our product coming from the U.S. So I do believe that is I see that as a good move for us, for Mary's, and introduce the American product, the American people to a Canadian product.
What a really interesting strategy, right, around the regulatory sort of barriers and a move by a Canadian company saying, you know what, we'll deal with the regulatory barriers here in Canada, but hey, in the States, I can move fairly freely, state by state, but still fairly freely. Dooma, your perspective, creating beer instead of hops out of cannabis plant. What were the drivers again for you entering this category?
Well, in fact, we use cannabis in place of barley. So our beverages do have hops. The ingredients are cannabis, hops, water, brewer's yeast. That's it. In terms of the drivers, it's very simple. I'm an OG in this industry, not quite 9 years like Chuck, but I'm 5 going on 6 years I've been in this space. And I think the impetus for this sort of came when my parents came to visit me in Colorado. They were so excited to go to a state with legal marijuana and let's go to a dispensary. And my dad's like, oh, this is going to be just like me back in Berkeley in the 60s. And he buys all this weed, and my mom buys a vaporizer pen, and they go home, and it's been like 40 years. My dad has no idea how to roll a joint. You know, it's like the Tootsie Roll, right? And my mom can't figure out the vaporizer. And in the end, we just end up eating the chocolates, you know, because we could do that. You know, it was simple. And, you know, when you think about it, there's 3 legal psychoactive substances in our world, right? You got coffee, caffeine, basically tobacco, and alcohol. And 2 of those 3 are consumed as beverages. And the third, tobacco, nobody really does anymore, right? So to me, that was very obvious proof that human beings like to consume their psychoactives as a beverage. So why are we wasting time making anything else? You know, that thesis has proven to be true, right? We started Province Brands in 2016, and a year later, Canada announced that they would allow beverages. And just 1 week after they announced that they would allow beverages, the first Fortune 500 company to invest in the cannabis industry. It wasn't a tobacco giant like you might expect because people smoke marijuana. It wasn't a pharmaceutical company you might expect because of medical marijuana. It was Constellation Brands, right? And beverage company. And you know, that showed that big alcohol knows that as you were saying, that there's a lot of health risks with their product. It showed that they know their days are numbered. And to me, it was a resounding endorsement of our business model and our approach.
So I'm going to ask about one product category that I don't think is represented here, and that's the vapes category. Right? So as we kind of move again from combustion, although people would argue, you know, vapes are combustion and just in a different form. Maybe a question, you know, we'll start with Chuck and then move down the line really quickly is, what's your thought about that? Why aren't you in that product category? Or are you thinking of in that product category?
So thanks, Peter. Actually, we are. But, you know, interestingly, when we started the company and as we were growing it in Colorado, which is a highly regulated market, we had great relationships with the regulators and the legislators. And one of the things that we decided not to do was enter into the concentrate space. We also, and you know, I usually say my mother didn't raise any dumb children, but she did this particular time because we didn't enter into the gummy market either. Well, we're in the gummy market now, I can tell you, because it's one of the fastest growing segments of the edible space. And we also just entered into the vape market. And I think what that goes to show you is that once you enter in this industry and you decide to commit to being very responsible, whether that's in the packaging, labeling, the product testing, the actual manufacturing of it, and certainly the distribution, this is a wide open market for many different types of consumer behavior and consumer desires. So vaping is a very normal aspect of consumer profile, and we're now in it with a brand name that we've innovated called Mindset that we just launched in Colorado, and soon we'll be launching in the other 4 markets that we're in.
Thank you. Are any of you investing or thinking about going into the vape space, being in beverages? I don't think so, right? No? Okay. Mary, I want you to jump in, though, on the wellness side of things. And, you know, Terry, I'm going to get you to talk to that, too, because we're going to move through wellness and talk about sort of alcohol and cannabinoids and sort of whether they're seeing substitution, integration, or something in between. But Mary, help us understand from a wellness perspective, you shared your story. What is it from your perspective of your product category that wellness is sort of the center of that?
Well, for my product, because it is herbs, and it's herbs mixed with another herb, which is a plant. It's a female plant, it's a beautiful plant, and I wanted our product to speak to people who care about wellness, who care about healing. I wanted to speak to mothers, I wanted to speak to grandmothers. I wanted to have that female product too that women can trust, because women, unfortunately, are not as comfortable with cannabis as most males. I found that out through experience. And so we really needed something that they can trust. And myself, I'm a personal user. I'm not just, you know, what is that commercial? I'm not just a client, or what was that here for the commercial? Anyhow.
Why are you looking at me?
I'm looking at
Hair club client?
And the whole thing is I'm also a user, and I'm also a very big advocate of what we do, because it is wellness plans. It is speaking to people who are looking for not just to get high, but to heal and to feel better and to be able to sleep well at night, or be able to have that muscle wake, you know, go away for the next couple hours, 2 or 3 hours. We're looking for a product that speaks to people about healing, about getting better, about feeling well, and that's why we chose a product that that I also use, that people can benefit from. And I didn't think alcohol was that product for us in going that route.
So it's really interesting, Virginia, and sorry I called you by the wrong name, that you talked about women in cannabis. And we actually, as a firm, we're having many conversations within our firm and with a lot of entrepreneurs out there. But what we're finding, you know, I'd be interested to hear, Chuck, because you have wellness products as well, is this whole demographic shift, or this research has very much emerged on the scene, that it is the middle-aged woman who is in charge of wellness decisions for most families. Is that very true? Is that something in your demographic as you guys talk about your product lines?
Well, there is a statistic that's out there that the fastest growing demographic in the industry in general is adults 50 years and older. So they're either coming into this industry really for one of 2 reasons, in our opinion. One is, as most of us have talked about, or at least certainly a lot of the theme is, they're looking at infused products or cannabis as an alternative component of their social regime. So we're moving either away from alcohol or certainly supplementing alcohol with a cannabis product, but also as really a foundation for their wellness platform for this consumer. And I'm excited because it is actually drawing a lot more female demographic into a dispensary. And you know, dispensary owners are also rising to the occasion to make their dispensaries much more approachable to an older demographic and certainly to a female consumer. So we're super excited about this market just continuing to expand.
I got to switch over to Dooma and Terry, and Terry, I'm going to get you to go first. That question, I just kind of tip my hand a little bit. Alcohol as a substitution versus integration, or what is it, and what's driving this in terms of drink categories?
I think what we're seeing from a regulatory standpoint, we've not really seen any marketplace that actually allows alcohol and cannabis in the same product. And the Health Act certainly, basically says you can't have more than one stimulant in any product, whether it's caffeine or nicotine, alcohol, or cannabis. So they really want to be able to offer consumers, from a regulatory standpoint, products where they can have a predictable outcome and where there's the ability to consume it safely without any fear of mixing or blending stimulants that lead to unpredictable outcomes. From our standpoint, we looked at really the opportunity was this growing trend in culture around the toxicity of alcohol. We've got the World Health Organization issued its 2018 status on alcohol consumption. Alcohol is actually responsible for 5% of all diseases in the world and responsible for 5% of all deaths in the world. So you've got this growing conversation around the risk and threat that alcohol poses to us, and yet the recorded amount of fatalities from cannabis consumption, according to the World Health Organization, is currently 0. Right? So you have 5% of all deaths annually and 0 in all time. So when you look at it from a risk profile standpoint, I think there's a huge opportunity for consumers to become more aware, to become more educated about how these alternatives can be far more beneficial or far less risky to consume from a health standpoint. And we've certainly seen it in the numbers. When you look at the American marketplace, in any market where cannabis became legal, and 82% of consumers halted their alcohol consumption, anywhere from 11.5% who completely quit drinking, down to about 24 to 25% who either significantly shifted their consumption to moderately shifted their consumption. So you've got this significant amount of shifting of behavior away from this toxic substance to this largely beneficial one, or at least far less risky product. And I think that that's going to be a huge opportunity for us, and you've got some really smart, inventive ways of using cannabis in teas and making beers. And it's the kind of thing where, it's not Google, right? There's not going to be one beverage. If we treated beverages like Google, we would all just drink Budweiser. But, last count, there's about 800 plus craft breweries. There's about 400 boutique wineries that are all independent companies in Canada. So consumers like change. They like different things. They like to try unique products and experiences, and I think that's what we're going to give them. Everything from, great beverages that are made with cannabis to new wines and varietals of wine to elixirs and teas and these kinds of products. It's going to be a great array of choice for consumers that allow them to live a healthier lifestyle. And I think it's all at alcohol's detriment. It's all at risk to the alcohol industry.
Wine or beer so far today? Any hands? I see 2. Maybe some people aren't telling the truth, but if we were having this meeting in 1967 and I asked that question, everybody's hand would go up because it's after lunchtime. And of course you have a cocktail with lunch. That's just how you used to do things. And if you look at the statistics, we're seeing across the developed world, consumption of alcohol is declining. And as Terry mentioned, in places where marijuana is being legalized in the developed world, it's declining even more. And a lot of folks get into the cannabis industry because they want to make medical marijuana. They have an ailment, or they know someone who has an ailment, or they have a child who has an ailment, or what have you. And I think that is so admirable and so amazing. But the reason I got into this industry is to make what I call a preventative medicine, a safer and healthier alternative to alcohol. And that is what we dedicate every moment of our working days to at Province Brands. We are studying what makes people love alcohol so much, and we're learning from this and trying to make a product that has all of the great things that alcohol has, whether it's the rapid onset time, alcohol hits you very quickly, whether it's the rapid offset time. Alcohol leaves your system much more quickly than edible cannabis would, to other aspects of what people like about alcohol. And we're using that to make what we believe to be the world's first true alternative to alcohol. And it's easy to villainize booze because it is toxic and carcinogenic and will probably kill you. But I think it's also important to realize all the great things that alcohol brings into our world, right? It brings people closer together. It helps us develop friendships and relationships. It helps you build phenomenal memories if you're not too young to remember the things that you're doing. And so we want to create a product that can give you all of those good things without any of the bad, and to do it in a way which is just as authentic as making a craft beer, that respects the environment, that respects locally grown products, locally grown ingredients, that keeps the values that have come out of that local craft brewing beer industry alive and brings them to this new exciting industry.
So before we get way too ahead of ourselves and everybody goes rushing out thinking that Dooma, Terry, and Virginia and Chuck might have stuff out there, and no, we didn't bring samples.
I did.
Okay, all right. Brought samples.
I did.
All right. They brought samples.
I didn't.
Chuck had a crossover. I'm going to ask Andrew, who's been very patient at the end. We can't forget Health Canada, a regulatory environment. We are still in this environment where we're building it as we fly it. So, Andrew, a couple of things. I'm going to get you to start. What do you think is coming down the pipe with respect to edibles legislation and the regs? What do you think the licenses are going to look like to produce and sell? Is there a change or shift coming? And then, we heard earlier, and even Cam Bagley sort of alluded to it, was, the policy decision, one of the biggest ones being, keeping it out of the hands of kids, because some of the stuff looks like, kid stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So with regards to legislation where that will be going, as Dooma and Terry had mentioned, that we will be seeing the proposal to that framework coming likely next week. If not next week, it will be in December. And that will be open for consultation for the public. So it's important for all of you, and obviously everybody on this panel will be voicing their opinions and their where the regulation should go. So that's going to be a proposal again from Health Canada, and that will take quite a bit of time for it to get from the after the initial public consultation, getting vetted, and then eventually creating a framework that will be published in Gazette 2. When that'll happen, we don't know, but there are some things to kind of consider down the road. When the Cannabis Act came out, basically, it was indicated that a year later that the edibles legalization would happen. A year from that is also a federal election, and typically what happens if there's a change in government, usually regulations are paused. And it's not because the new government, if there is a new government that comes into place, that they're necessarily not approving it. It's just simply bureaucracy, and all regulations or proposed regulations simply just go on hold until that all shakes out. New ministers of health and whatnot are all laid out, and then their mandate that goes to the various divisions in Health Canada are sorted out. So, so that's kind of, hopefully we will get this by next, fourth quarter of 2019, but that's the caveat that we have to consider too, is the federal election. What was your second question?
The types of licenses.
Types
and
of
the
licenses.
third one is around policy around, kid stuff.
Yeah, so around licenses, we're expecting that the current cannabis regulations, which allows for processing, for example, which would be currently we can do oil extraction, packaging, labeling, bottling, but infusion is not allowed in the current cannabis regs. What we would expect to see is probably an amendment to the current regs to allow for infusion, and that license would be a cannabis processing license. It wouldn't be a food license per se. However, keep in mind that if you are a manufacturer, importer, exporter, packager, labeler of foods, you would also require a food license from January 15th onwards. That's under the Safe Food for Canadian regulations. So essentially a food license as well as a processing license. Now, one thing that could be done now is obtaining a research license, a cannabis research license that allows you to develop and basically taste testing or whatnot of cannabis type products. So that's one way to get into the market, and a research license is relatively quicker to obtain compared to a processing license. Thirdly, with regards to where these regulations will shake out, with regards to different subpopulations, children, adults, seniors. Keeping in mind these new regs that are coming into place in January called Safe Food for Canadians. And that's really the focus of not just CFIA, but it'll also be for the CLRB, for the Cannabis Licensing and Regulations Branch. And so with children, obviously, and youth, they want to make sure that cannabis doesn't go into their hands. Don't be surprised if we see in these proposed regulations restrictions on dosage formats, colors, obviously marketing and advertising, which is already being very strict, that will carry forward on edibles as well. So again, it's about protecting the youth and children, and so again, they'll be probably monitoring that as those regulations come through. We do have a current framework that's in existence for supplemented foods, so foods where there are herbals and medicinal ingredients that can be infused into beverages or products. I mean, Red Bull, awake chocolate, all those types of products are essentially supplemented foods. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some sort of a food license that comes into play for the edibles and ingestibles. And that'll be a way for Health Canada to really track and monitor sales, adverse reactions, that sort of thing through, as this matures. So, which is very important. Obviously, we want to make sure that we know where it's going, the safety and efficacy in some cases for wellness products. And don't be surprised to also see the natural health products category also develop out from the edibles and ingestibles regulations.